You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Imagine European culture as a river, turbulent, restless, surging ever faster toward a waterfall it can neither see nor avoid. Now, what if I told you that Nietzsche saw our entire civilization hurtling toward catastrophe, not from war or famine, but from an invisible enemy, nihilism? Nihilism, in simple terms, is the radical rejection of value, meaning, and desirability. Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher, he was a seismograph, detecting cultural quakes long before anyone else. He saw that after centuries of relying on religion and absolute truths, the West was losing its centered sun, as he put it. Now you might be thinking, isn't nihilism just a fancy word for pessimism? But let me clarify. Nihilism, for Nietzsche, is like pulling the plug on the world's purpose. It's not just gloom, it's the absence of anything to strive for. Here's the catch. Nietzsche believed this was inevitable. As our values crumbled under the weight of scientific rationality, what once gave us meaning religion, tradition could no longer anchor us. This is existential crisis on a civilizational scale. So, why does it matter? Because according to Nietzsche, if we don't face this abyss, if we don't confront the collapse of our values, we'll keep drifting lost, listless, and, ultimately, diminished. What do we mean by nihilism exactly? Let's break it down. There's epistemological nihilism, the belief that knowledge itself is impossible, like trying to read a book with invisible ink. Then there's cosmic nihilism, the sense that the universe is indifferent, even hostile, to human concerns. But Nietzsche's main focus? Existential nihilism. That's the feeling that life in its entirety has no intrinsic value or meaning. Imagine waking up to a world that suddenly lost all color, all musica, total flattening of significance. Now, here's a twist. Nietzsche didn't think humans could ever stop valuing entirely. Valuing is as natural to us as breathing. Buffet warned it's not enough just to value something. It has to be the right kind of value. Think of nihilism as a virus with many strains. Some people lose themselves in despair, others in confusion, still others in sheer indifference. Nietzsche wanted to diagnose all these forms, not to judge, but to understand our predicament. So, as we move forward, keep these forms in mind: despair, disorientation, and the lack of higher values. Each is a symptom of a deeper malaise eating away at the heart of modern life. Let me tell you a story. Imagine someone who sees the world as a place of endless sufferinga, never-ending struggle between pain and boredom. That's the Schopenhauerian view, and is echoed in certain forms of Buddhism. This kind of nihilist isn't indifferent. They care deeply, so much so that the world's suffering feels overwhelming. Their value system says suffering is the worst thing, pleasure is fleeting, and existence itself might be a mistake. They aren't apathetic, they're crushed by the weight of existence. Nietzsche called this the will to nothingness, a drive to escape, to renounce life. In technical terms, it's asceticism, the deliberate rejection of worldly pleasures, seeking liberation from all desire. But here's the conflict. While this seems noble, Nietzsche thought it's still a form of nihilism. Why? Because it's a life negation. It says, better not to be at all than to suffer. It's a powerful response to suffering. But Nietzsche asks, must we really deny life to escape pain? Or can we find another way to affirm existence, even in the face of adversity? Have you ever felt like the ground was shifting under your feet, as if your compass no longer points north? That's nihilism as disorientation, which Nietzsche saw in Christianity's twilight. He famously proclaimed, God is dead, and we have killed him. But what does this really mean? The Christian worldview promised redemption, purpose, and eternal life. When faith fades, so does the anchor for all those values. There's a technical term for this: value devaluation. The highest ideals truth, goodness, salvation lose their grip. We're left spinning without an up or down. Nietzsche's parable of the madman paints this cosmic vertigo perfectly. Now you might ask, can't we just invent new meanings? But Nietzsche warns that losing faith is like unmooring a ship in a storm you drift, sometimes dangerously so. Christianity, he argued, built its own undoing by insisting on absolute truth. When that truth crumbles, we're left searching sometimes desperately for something, anything, to fill the void. Let's meet Nietzsche's most chilling character, the last man. Picture someone cozy, content, sipping cocoa in front of a fireplace, utterly untroubled by big questions. Is this happiness, or is it the end of striving? The last man isn't depressed or confused, he's satisfied with the bare minimum. He avoids pain, avoids challenge, and above all, avoids greatness. His culture, entertainment, and comfort. His highest value? Not rocking the boat. Now, you might object, isn't contentment a good thing? But Nietzsche sees a problem. The last man's standards are so low, he never reaches for the stars. He's lost the will to aspire, to create, to excel. That's nihilism, just in a subtler form. Technically, this is a lack of higher values. The last man focuses on immediate pleasure, not on purpose or transcendence. His world is small, Nietzsche says safe, but stifling. So, the paradox. The last man seems happiest, but for Nietzsche, he's the ultimate victim of nihilism, a person who's forgotten how to care about what truly matters. Let's rewind to the Enlightenment. Science starts answering questions that used to belong to religion. We learn about evolution, the vastness of the cosmos, the randomness of our birth. On the surface, this sounds empowering, but here's the twist. As we pull back the curtain, the old sources of meaning dissolve. The universe becomes an indifferent expanseno divine plan. No cosmic justice. Nietzsche called this the advent of nihilism. The highest values, once rooted in faith, now seem arbitrarily devalued. The technical term? Value transvaluation, when the old table of values collapses and nothing yet replaces it. Now you might ask, isn't progress good? Absolutely. But Nietzsche warns, when meaning is stripped away, people can spiral into crisis. We discover our smallness, our contingency. The real challenge isn't scientific discovery, it's finding a way to live meaningfully in a world that no longer tells us what to value. That's the existential task Nietzsche set before us. Now, let's get technical for a moment. Nietzsche distinguishes between two phases of nihilism, passive and active. Passive nihilism is resignation, a sense of defeat, like sinking quietly into quicksand. This is the mentality behind the ascetic ideal rejecting life, withdrawing from the world. Systems like Schopenhauerianism, Buddhism, and Christianity often fall here, according to Nietzsche. But there's another path, active nihilism. Imagine a person who stares into the abyss, sees the void, and decides to build a new meaning anyway. This is not destruction for its own sake, it's creative transformation. Active nihilism is the engine behind the Übermensch, the overman who creates new values. It's like using a wrecking ball, not just to demolish, but to clear space for something greater. So which are you? The one who recedes from the challenger, the one who dares to invent anew? Nietzsche believed this choice could define the fate of individuals and civilizations alike. Why do people embrace self-denial? For centuries, saints and sages preached poverty, humility, chastity, what Nietzsche called the ascetic ideal. But was this noble or another form of nihilism? Asceticism is technically the renunciation of worldly desires, a strategy for coping with suffering. It gives suffering a purpose, cloaks emptiness with a sense of mission. Now you might wonder, isn't finding meaning in suffering admirable? In some ways, yes. Nietzsche conceded that even misguided meaning is better than none at all. But here's the snag. The ascetic ideal ultimately turns against life, preferring nothingness over existence. He saw this as a will to nothingness, a subtle poison that devalues the world in favor of a hypothetical beyond. Instead of affirming life, it becomes a strategy to escape it. Nietzsche's challenge: can we find a way to affirm life's hardships without running from them? Can we build a value system that says yes to existence, suffering, and all? Nietzsche didn't want to just destroy, he wanted to test our values, to tap them with a hammer and hear if they ring true or hollow. Picture a sculptor chipping away at marble to reveal something authentic underneath. He called for a revaluation of all values, a philosophical audit, which values are life-affirming and which are leftovers from a world we've outgrown. Now you may ask, isn't this dangerous? What if we lose our moral compass entirely? It's a real risk. Nietzsche saw nihilism as an unavoidable stage, but not the final destination. The technical term here is critical genealogy, tracing the origins and functions of our morals, exposing where they help or hinder life. Nietzsche's hope was that by clearing away false idols, we can make room for values rooted in this world creativity, strength, beauty, and above all, life itself. So what's Nietzsche's answer to nihilism? Enter the Übermensch, the overman, Not a superhero, but someone who creates their own values, who says yes to life in all its messiness. He introduces two daunting concepts: the will to power our drive to overcome, to grow stronger, and the eternal recurrence, the idea that we should live as if we gladly repeat our lives endlessly. Imagine being told, you must relive this moment forever. Would you rejoice or recoil? Nietzsche thought only the highest life affirmer could say, yes, could embrace fate, or amor fati, as he called it. The Übermensch is the antithesis of the last man. He doesn't blink at the star she becomes one, blazing new paths. His meaning is self-made, rooted in this earth, in creativity, excellence, and self-mastery. The challenge for all of us: can we rise to the standard? Can we transform the abyss of nihilism into a launching pad for new greatness? That's the ultimate test of Nietzsche's philosophy. Fast forward to today, does Nietzsche's diagnosis still hold? Absolutely. In an age of constant distraction, instant gratification, and information overload, many of us feel a nagging emptiness beneath the noise. Mass movements, consumer culture, even political extremism, these can become substitutes for higher meaning, filling the void but rarely satisfying it. Think of them as existential band-aids, not cures. Now you might wonder, are we stuck? Is the last man all we can hope for? Nietzsche would urge us not to settle. He believed the human spirit is capable of creative rebirth, of forging new values from the ashes of the old. The technical terms are existential crisis and value creation processes we all undergo when our old certainties collapse and we're forced to ask, what really matters to me? So as you listen, ask yourself, what values would you choose if the old ones vanished tomorrow? That's the personal, urgent challenge Nietzsche leaves for each of us.